An invisible brotherhood published 3 mysterious books that promised to reshape the world. This is the secret history of the Rosicrucian Enlightenment, a pivotal moment when hidden knowledge nearly sparked a revolution in science, spirituality, and society. By the end of this story, you will understand how a 400-year-old literary hoax, if that is what it was, came to influence everything from modern science to secret societies. We will uncover who might have written these enigmatic texts and ask whether a real fraternity of adepts ever existed in the shadows. What does the search for a perfect, hidden wisdom reveal about our own world today? A mysterious document appeared without warning in the early 17th century, its pages promising a secret that would shake the very foundations of knowledge. This was the Fama Fraternitatis, the first public declaration of the invisible Rosicrucian Brotherhood. It told the incredible story of a German adept named Christian Rosenkreuz. As a young man, he traveled to Damascus in Egypt, absorbing ancient wisdom from masters in the mystic arts. He then journeyed to a land called Damkar, a place of supreme learning, before bringing this synthesized knowledge back to Europe. Finding his fellow scholars resistant to true reform, he chose a different path. He founded a small, secret fraternity dedicated not to personal gain, but to the healing of all humanity. The brothers lived and worked in silence, bound by a sacred oath to conceal their activities until the world was ready for their transformative message. The most stunning revelation in the Fama, however, was the discovery of Christian Rosenkreuz's final resting place. 120 years after his death, the brothers accidentally found a hidden door within their headquarters. Behind it lay a vault, a 7-sided chamber filled with dazzling, otherworldly artifacts and illuminated by an inner light. At its center rested the perfectly preserved body of their founder, holding a small book inscribed with the letters VITRIOL. This was not merely a tomb, it was a library of ultimate truth. The anonymous publication of this text sent an electric shock across Europe. For a society weary of religious wars and intellectual stagnation, the Fama was a beacon of radical hope. It suggested that a small group of enlightened individuals possessed the secrets to a perfect society, a world healed by a lost science. Readers everywhere began asking the same urgent question. Where was this brotherhood, and how could they join this coming reformation of the entire world? But the Fama was only the beginning. 1 year later, a second, even more provocative manifesto appeared. Titled the Confessio Fraternitatis, this document was a direct call to action aimed squarely at Europe's intellectuals and spiritual seekers. Its tone was sharper, more urgent, and openly critical of the institutions that held power. The Confessio declared that the Pope in Rome, along with his entire organization, was flawed and destined for a great and deserved transformation. It similarly chastised the academic world for its arrogance, for clinging to outdated books while ignoring the living book of nature itself. This was not just an invitation, it was a declaration of war against intellectual and religious stagnation. The manifesto promised nothing less than a universal reformation of all mankind, a new dawn where truth would be restored and the entire world healed. Yet it cleverly positioned the invisible brotherhood not as rebels, but as allies. They sought the pious and the learned, those who yearned for a deeper connection with God and His creation. The message was clear. The Rosicrucians were on the side of genuine faith and true science, standing against the corrupt authorities that had failed the people. This brilliant positioning made the mystery even more tantalizing. The public was not being asked to follow a new tyrant, but to join a secret alliance of enlightened souls. Imagine being a scholar or a spiritual seeker in that era, reading these words. You felt that the world was broken, and here was a hidden group claiming to have the cure. They spoke of a coming golden age, and they said you, if you were worthy, could be a part of its dawn. The Confessio did not just fuel the public's imagination, it poured oil on a fire that was already burning. All across the continent, the same desperate question now echoed in letters, in taverns, and in university halls. How does one find this brotherhood? The answer, it seemed, was not to be found in any public square. The path to the Rosicrucians was a secret one, visible only to those with the eyes to see. Yet the third and final text moved the mystery into an entirely new dimension. Published in 1616, The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz is a story so rich with symbolism that it completely reframed the Rosicrucian quest. This was not a manifesto or a public declaration, but a deeply personal, allegorical tale of inner transformation. The story begins with our founder, Christian Rosenkreuz, now an old man, receiving an invitation. A winged woman appears to him, summoning him to attend a royal wedding at a magnificent castle. This is no ordinary celebration. It is the chemical wedding, a sacred alchemical union, and he is to be a guest for 7 mystical days. Each day presents a new series of tests, puzzles, and ordeals. He witnesses the trial and execution of royal figures, only to see them miraculously reborn. He explores a wondrous 7-story tower, each level representing a stage of spiritual ascent. The entire narrative is a dense tapestry of alchemical imagery, where physical processes like distillation and fermentation symbolize the purification of the human soul. The quest for the philosopher's stone was never just about turning lead into gold. It was a metaphor for achieving spiritual perfection, for transforming the base material of your own being into a higher state of consciousness. The chemical wedding made it clear that becoming a true Rosicrucian was not about intellectual agreement or simply wanting to join a secret club. It was an initiatory journey, a path of severe personal testing and rebirth. You could not just find the brothers, you had to become the kind of person they would accept, a soul refined through its own trials. This shifted the entire search inward. For those desperate to make contact, the book presented a profound and challenging message. The real castle was not on any map. The true wedding was happening within. The public was left with an impossible puzzle. Were they being told to look for a physical, invisible fraternity, or were they being guided to undertake a solitary, spiritual quest? The answer, it seemed, was somehow both. Yet the central figure of this entire mystery remains shrouded in his own legend, who was Christian Rosenkreuz. The manifestos provide a biography that reads like an epic quest. As a young man, he was placed in a monastery but soon left to embark on an extraordinary pilgrimage. His journey took him eastward to the very fountains of ancient knowledge. In Damascus and Egypt, he learned from masters of medicine and mathematics. He then traveled to the mythical city of Damkar, a place of supreme intellectual and spiritual enlightenment, where he translated a sacred book of ultimate wisdom into Latin. After years of travel, he returned to Europe with a singular mission to share this synthesized knowledge for the betterment of humanity. He found his contemporaries stubborn and resistant to true reform. So he retreated, gathering a small circle of like-minded men into a secret fraternity. They built a house called Sanctus Spiritus, the house of the Holy Spirit, where they lived, worked, and compiled their wisdom in total secrecy. The biography is rich with detail, yet it feels more like a parable than a historical record. This is the core of the debate that has raged for centuries. Was Christian Rosenkreuz a real person? Some scholars argue he was a literary composite, a symbolic figure crafted from the lives of several historical Renaissance magi and alchemists. His name itself is a powerful clue. Christian Rosenkreuz translates to Christian Rosicrucian, a name that directly merges Christianity with the central symbol of esoteric wisdom and divine love. Others see him as pure allegory, a representation of the enlightened soul's journey. He is the seeker who travels to the inner east of his own consciousness, gathers the scattered fragments of universal truth, and integrates them into a perfected self, symbolized by the founding of his inner fraternity. The discovery of his vault with his uncorrupted body further fuels this interpretation. It suggests not a physical death, but the achievement of a permanent state of spiritual immortality, a goal of the alchemical process. So we are left with a beautiful and frustrating puzzle. The founder is presented with the weight of history, yet he operates on the level of myth. Perhaps the most compelling perspective is that he was designed to be both. For a 17th century audience, the idea of a single, heroic wise man would have been a powerful rallying point, yet the deeper message of the chemical wedding makes it clear that every individual must undertake their own journey to become a Christian Rosenkreuz. The question of his historical reality may be the wrong one. The real power of the figure is that he embodies a process, an ideal of spiritual and intellectual rebirth that anyone could, in theory, achieve. He is a mirror, and the manifestos ask every reader a simple, profound question. Is this a story about a man who lived long ago, or is it an invitation to live that story yourself? Europe in the early 1600s was a continent on the brink of explosion. Religious hatred between Catholics and Protestants had festered for generations, creating a political powder keg waiting for a single spark. That spark would soon ignite the 30 Years' War, a conflict so devastating it would wipe out entire regions of Central Europe. This was a time when your faith could determine your right to live, and the authority of the Church was being questioned not just by reformers, but by a new force, the emerging light of science. Into this world of fear and fracture, the Rosicrucian manifestos fell like a lit match. Their promise of a universal reformation was not merely an interesting idea. It was a desperate hope. People were exhausted by doctrinal disputes that led to mass violence. They were hungry for a truth that transcended the bitter divisions of the day, a wisdom that could unite what was torn apart. The manifestos cleverly positioned the invisible brotherhood above the fray. They were neither Catholic nor Protestant in the traditional sense, but something new, a fusion of pious Christian faith and a radical, experimental science. They spoke of reading the book of nature, a text available to all, regardless of creed. This was profoundly appealing to intellectuals trapped between dogmatic religion and a dawning empirical world. Imagine a scholar watching his world tear itself to pieces over interpretations of Scripture, then reading a text that says, "Look, there is a greater truth, a divine science that heals rather than condemns." The Rosicrucian call was for a spiritual and intellectual revolution that would make the old fights obsolete. It offered a third path, a secret society of the enlightened that could operate outside the crumbling structures of power. The public was not just curious, they were desperate for this to be real. The manifestos did not create a fantasy, they gave a name and a structure to a yearning that was already everywhere. The ground was not just fertile, it was parched, and the Rosicrucian promise was the rain. So we arrive at the central, burning question that has haunted scholars for 4 centuries. Was there ever a real, physical Rosicrucian brotherhood meeting in secret, or was the entire phenomenon a brilliant fiction? The evidence is a labyrinth of clues and contradictions. On one hand, there is no verified historical record, no membership roster, no letters of correspondence that definitively prove the existence of an organized order calling itself the Rosicrucians in the early 1600s. For many, this silence is the most damning evidence of all. How could a group that promised to reform the entire world leave absolutely no paper trail? This has led to the persistent theory that the manifestos were an elaborate literary hoax, a thought experiment designed to stir debate and provoke intellectual revolution without the risks of founding an actual secret society. Others propose a more calculated motive, that the texts were propaganda, perhaps written by Lutheran reformers to rally support against the Catholic Habsburg monarchy, using the language of mystery to conceal a political agenda. Yet the hoax theory feels incomplete. The response to the manifestos was immediate, passionate, and widespread. People across Europe wrote heartfelt letters, published their own supportive texts, and physically traveled to Germany, desperately seeking the invisible brothers. A simple prank would not have ignited such a profound and lasting fire. This leads to a more compelling possibility, the idea of an invisible college. This was not a formal society with a headquarters and membership dues, but a loose network of like-minded intellectuals, alchemists, and physicians who shared a common vision. They were united by their desire for a new synthesis of faith and science, and they may have used the powerful symbol of Christian Rosenkreuz as a unifying banner. Think of it not as a secret clubhouse, but as a state of mind, A philosopher in England, a doctor in Italy, and a mathematician in Prague might never meet, but by reading the same books and pursuing the same spiritual goals, they were, in essence, brothers of the same invisible fraternity. The manifestos did not describe an existing organization so much as they called one into being. They provided a shared language and a heroic mythos for a revolution that was already brewing in the hearts of Europe's greatest thinkers. The real Rosicrucian order may have been a prophecy that fulfilled itself, a name given to a hidden current of thought that suddenly and powerfully broke the surface. At the core of the Rosicrucian promise was a science that seemed to defy conventional logic, the ancient art of alchemy. Yet to dismiss this as a mere quest for golden riches is to miss the entire point. The true gold the adepts sought was not a metal, but the spiritual perfection of the human soul itself. This was the great work, the process of inner alchemy. The manifestos are saturated with this symbolic language, presenting a roadmap for personal transformation where the laboratory was the human heart and mind. The base metal was one's own imperfect nature, and the philosopher's stone was the achieved state of divine consciousness. This was the real universal reformation, a revolution starting within a single individual. Consider the powerful symbol of the phoenix, the mythical bird that consumes itself in fire only to rise again from its own ashes. In the alchemical process, this represents the stage of putrefaction and calcination. The old self, with its ego and worldly attachments, must be utterly broken down and burned away. It is a necessary death, a dissolution of identity that feels like an ending, but is in fact the essential precondition for rebirth. The seeker must be willing to let their former understanding turn to ash, trusting that a more luminous awareness will emerge from the ruins. This is the first and most terrifying ordeal on the path. From that symbolic death blooms the rose, a central emblem woven into the very name Rosicrucian. The rose is not a gentle symbol of mere beauty. It is a complex glyph of the unfolding soul, its many petals representing layers of wisdom gradually revealed. More profoundly, the rose often grows from thorns and thrives in difficult soil, symbolizing how spiritual attainment flourishes through hardship and sacrifice. It represents the heart opening to divine love and cosmic harmony, a process that is both beautiful and painful. The rose is the flowering of the inner self after the fire of the phoenix has done its work. This inner transformation finds its structure and support in the symbol of the cross. The cross is the universal axis, the point where the divine and the material worlds intersect. It represents the seeker's own body and spirit, the crucible where the great work takes place. The vertical axis signifies the connection to higher realms and spiritual aspiration, while the horizontal axis represents our earthly existence and service to humanity. The alchemical process happens precisely at this crossroads, where spiritual ambition is grounded in practical duty and moral integrity. The cross is the framework that gives the chaotic process of transformation a sacred geometry and a purpose. When these symbols are united as the rosy cross, they form a complete picture of the initiate's goal. It is the marriage of the blooming, compassionate heart, the rose, with the enduring, sacrificial structure of the spirit, the cross. This is the chemical wedding made manifest within a single human being. The promise of the manifestos was not that a secret society would do this work for you, but that they possessed the map. They knew the stages of this inner journey, from the dark night of the soul to the brilliant dawn of enlightenment. The real treasure they guarded was not hidden in a physical vault, but encoded in these symbols, waiting for a seeker with the insight to read them. So the question shifts once more. It is no longer about finding a hidden brotherhood, but about understanding the language they left behind, what other codes were embedded in their writings, and who possessed the key to decipher them. The symbols of the rose and cross were not born in a vacuum. They were drawn from ancient streams of thought that flowed directly into the Rosicrucian wellspring. To understand the manifestos, we must uncover their intellectual ancestry, a lineage that stretches back to the mystical heart of the ancient world. This heritage is rooted in two profound traditions, Hermeticism and Kabbalah. The first, Hermeticism, takes its name from the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus, a figure believed to be a contemporary of Moses. His teachings were built upon a single, universe-altering principle, as above, so below. This axiom suggests that the vast cosmos, the macrocosm, and the individual human being, the microcosm, are perfect mirrors of one another. The same laws that govern the movements of stars and planets also operate within our own bodies and souls. For an alchemist, this was the ultimate key. The process of transforming lead into gold in a laboratory flask was a direct reflection of the soul's journey towards spiritual perfection. The outer work was a guide to the inner work. The Rosicrucian vision of reforming the world was an extension of this principle. They sought to heal a sick society because they believed that society, like a human body, was a microcosm that had fallen out of alignment with the harmonious laws of the macrocosm. Their mission was to bring the world below back into sync with the divine order above. Alongside this cosmic philosophy flowed the deep currents of Christian Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the Jewish mystical tradition focused on uncovering the hidden esoteric meanings within the Hebrew scriptures. Christian scholars, particularly during the Renaissance, adopted these methods and applied them to their own Bible. They believed that by studying the numerical values of Hebrew letters, the shapes of the characters, and the secret arrangements of words, they could decode a second, deeper layer of divine revelation hidden in plain sight. This was not about replacing faith, but about deepening it through a sacred science of letters and numbers. The Rosicrucian manifestos are imbued with this Kabbalistic spirit. Their use of enigmatic symbols and the very structure of their narratives suggest a text with multiple levels of meaning, inviting the reader to look beyond the surface. The perfect preservation of Christian Rosenkreuz's body for 120 years is not just a miracle, it is a number rich with symbolic significance, a puzzle for the initiated to decipher. The Rosicrucian genius lay in their synthesis. They wove the cosmic correspondence of Hermeticism together with the divine linguistics of Kabbalah, binding them both within a framework of devout Christianity. They created a new kind of spiritual science, one where praying, experimenting in a laboratory, and deciphering ancient texts were not separate activities, but different facets of the same great work. A Rosicrucian adept might look through a telescope to understand God's macrocosm, peer into a microscope to study the microcosm, and contemplate a biblical verse through Kabbalah to connect them both to divine will. This was their revolutionary third path, a way to be both a sincere Christian and a radical seeker of empirical truth. The manifestos were not a rejection of religion, but an attempt to rediscover its most profound, hidden heart. They offered a key, suggesting that the ultimate secrets of God were not locked away in dusty church dogma, but were written in the language of mathematics, encoded in the elements, and waiting to be read in the very structure of reality itself. This dream of a unified science found its ultimate expression in a single, breathtaking idea, pansophy. The word itself means all wisdom, and it represented the Rosicrucian conviction that every branch of knowledge, from astronomy to zoology, from prayer to chemistry, was interconnected. They saw the universe as a single, vast, and living book written by the hand of God. The problem, as they saw it, was that humanity had torn this book to pieces. Theologians were studying one ripped-out page, scientists another, and physicians yet another, with no one understanding how they all fit together to form a coherent whole. The Rosicrucian Reformation was not about inventing new knowledge, but about reassembling this shattered divine library. Their goal was a complete system of universal knowledge, a pansophy where the laws of nature perfectly reflected the truths of Scripture and where healing the human body was inseparable from healing the human spirit. This was not an academic exercise, it was a rescue mission for civilization, an attempt to end the endless squabbling over fragmented truths by revealing the one magnificent truth that contained them all. This visionary ideal did not remain locked in a secret manuscript. It found one of its most powerful voices in a real-world figure, the Czech teacher and philosopher John Amos Comenius. Deeply influenced by the Rosicrucian call, Comenius dedicated his life to bringing Pansophy down to earth. He believed that this unified knowledge should not be a secret for a chosen few, but the foundation for educating every single person. He envisioned a system of universal education, a ladder of learning that would lead every child from the simplest sensory experiences to an understanding of the cosmos and their place within it. His textbooks revolutionized teaching by using pictures and connecting ideas to everyday life, all guided by the Pansophic principle that everything is connected. For Comenius, a school was not a factory for memorizing facts. It was a workshop for the soul, a place where a new generation could learn to read the single, unified book of God's creation. He dreamed of a Pan-Sophic college, a universal center of learning where the world's greatest minds would collaborate to compile this total human knowledge for the benefit of all nations. In this vision, you see the true legacy of the Rosicrucian Enlightenment. It was not about hiding wisdom in a vault, but about making it so universally available that the very idea of a secret would become obsolete. The Invisible Brothers were not hoarding light, they were trying to teach the world how to see. The idea of an invisible college ignited a firestorm that swept across the continent. This was the Rosicrucian furor, a cultural obsession that saw a frantic flood of pamphlets pouring from printing presses. Some authors wrote passionate defenses of the Brotherhood, hailing them as the saviors of a new age. Others published furious condemnations, branding the Invisible Fraternity as a dangerous cabal of devil worshippers and sorcerers. The public could not get enough. They devoured every new text, searching for a hidden clue, a coded address, anything that might lead them to the source of the mystery. But the printed word was only the beginning. A far more curious phenomenon emerged. Individuals began to step forward, boldly declaring that they themselves were Rosicrucian adepts. Charlatans and sincere seekers alike adopted the mantle, offering their services as healers, alchemists, and prophets. How could you prove they were not telling the truth? The very invisibility of the true order made every claim impossible to fully verify. This created a bizarre landscape where genuine mystical wisdom and outright fraud existed side by side, leaving desperate patrons to wonder if the man promising to transmute lead into gold was a true initiate or a clever con artist. The obsession turned to paranoia in many quarters. Rumors spread of brothers who could make themselves unseen, who gathered in secret chambers to direct the fate of nations. People began to see Rosicrucians everywhere, a wealthy patron of the arts, a reclusive scholar, a traveling physician. Any figure of mystery could be suspected of belonging to the hidden fraternity. In some towns, strangers with unusual knowledge were questioned or even driven out by a fearful populace. The authorities grew deeply uneasy. If this invisible brotherhood was real, it represented a power outside their control, a secret government operating in the shadows. The very promise that had given so many hope, the idea of a benevolent guiding hand, was interpreted by others as a terrifying threat. The same texts that spoke of healing and universal love were read by princes and bishops as manuals for rebellion. This was the double-edged nature of the furor. It was a wave of hopeful excitement for a coming golden age, but also a fever of suspicion and anxiety. The public yearning for a hidden wisdom had created a monster of its own making, a phantom so powerful it could inspire both devotion and terror without ever showing its face. The central question remained, who had unleashed this phantom upon the world? One name rises above all others in the hunt for the manifesto's true author. Johann Valentin Andreae was a Lutheran theologian and scholar from Württemberg, a man deeply committed to a reform movement known as Pietism, which emphasized personal faith and heartfelt devotion over dry church ritual. In his later years, he made a stunning admission. He claimed to be the author of The Chemical Wedding, the most mystical of the three core texts, and he dismissed his own work as a ludibrium, a Latin word meaning a jest, a game, or a playful trifle. This confession seems to slam the door on the mystery, exposing the entire Rosicrucian epic as an elaborate literary prank. But the door does not stay closed. The debate over what Andreae truly meant by that word, ludibrium, is a labyrinth in itself. Was he admitting to a simple hoax, a youthful folly he now regretted? Or was he using the language of dismissal to protect a dangerous spiritual secret from the scrutiny of the Orthodox Church? Andry's entire life contradicts the idea of a mere joker. He was a serious reformer who dreamed of creating a Christian-learned society, a Christianopolis, dedicated to the very pansophic ideals the manifestos champion. His own writings reveal a man desperate for a spiritual and intellectual reformation, a fusion of faith and science that sounds exactly like the Rosicrucian third path. So why would he call his profound allegory a jest? Perhaps the game was not the content, but the presentation. By wrapping a serious spiritual call in the cloak of a wild fairy tale, he could attract the right kind of reader, the one who could see past the surface to the inner meaning. For the wrong kind of reader, the powerful church authorities, he could always claim it was just a story, a harmless piece of fiction. The ludibrium was not the truth he was telling, but the playful disguise he used to tell it safely. Andry becomes the perfect embodiment of the entire Rosicrucian enigma. He is both the likely author and the man who seems to deny it, a theologian who preaches piety while crafting a story of alchemical resurrection. He points us toward the idea that the deepest truths could not be spoken plainly in his time. They had to be encoded in a game, a wedding, a fable, leaving a trail of symbols for the worthy to follow while the unseeing saw only a jest. The search for authorship cannot end with a single man. Johann Valentin Andry was not a solitary genius working in a vacuum, but the center of a brilliant and radical intellectual circle in the city of Tübingen. To understand the origins of the manifestos, we must step into this world of passionate debate and shared dreams, where the lines between theology, magic, and science were deliberately blurred. Among Andry's closest collaborators was Tobias Hess, a man of immense learning and unorthodox spirit. Hess was a fervent believer in the coming of a new age, a prophetic golden era foretold in Scripture and in the patterns of nature itself. He saw the world as being on the cusp of a great purification, a fiery transformation that would burn away the corruption of the old world to make way for the new. This was not a gentle hope, but a radical expectation of imminent, divinely ordained revolution. Hess' influence can be felt pulsing through the urgent, millennial tone of the Fama Fraternitatis, with its bold declarations that the old orders were destined for a great and deserved fall. His belief system provided the fiery fuel for the Rosicrucian promise of a universal reformation. Another pivotal figure was Christoph Besold, a renowned legal scholar and linguist. Besold's mind was a library of esoteric knowledge, deeply versed in Kabbalah, prophecy, and the mystical traditions the manifestos so clearly echoed. He was a bridge builder, a man who saw the underlying unity in all spiritual paths. It was Besold who likely provided the profound intellectual architecture, the deep symbolic resonance drawn from Hermetic and Kabbalistic sources that gave the texts their timeless, mysterious quality. He understood that a true reformation required a new language, one that could speak to both the heart of a Christian and the mind of a natural philosopher. This Tübingen circle was a crucible. They were young, brilliant, and deeply frustrated with the intellectual and religious stalemate of their time. In their private conversations, they wove together Hess' prophetic fire, Besold's esoteric wisdom, and Andry's own passion for practical Christian reform. The Rosicrucian manifestos were the natural offspring of this collaboration. They were not the doctrine of a formal society, but the published dream of a fellowship of thinkers. Imagine these men gathered in a study, the air thick with the scent of old books and new ideas. They are crafting a vision, a grand thought experiment. What if a secret society of enlightened beings already existed? What would its goals be? How would it call out to the world? The Fama, the Confessio, and the chemical wedding were their collective answer. This collaborative origin explains the manifestos' enduring power and their frustrating contradictions. They are not a single, coherent doctrine because they emerged from a symphony of different, albeit harmonious, voices. The political radicalism, the spiritual allegory, and the call for a new science were all facets of a single, multifaceted gem, cut and polished by a group of friends who dared to imagine a different world. The invisible brotherhood began not in a hidden vault, but in the vibrant, restless minds of a few young men in a German university town. The ideas born in a Tübingen study did not remain confined to books or private circles. They found a new and powerful home within the most famous fraternity of the modern world. The intellectual and spiritual DNA of the Rosicrucian manifestos was woven directly into the fabric of speculative Freemasonry, providing a deep esoteric lineage for a movement that was defining itself. As Masonic lodges flourished across Europe in the 18th century, their members sought more than architectural allegories. They yearned for a spiritual heritage, a connection to an ancient wisdom tradition that could explain the deeper purpose of their symbols and rituals. The story of Christian Rosenkreuz and his invisible college offered exactly that. Here was a ready-made myth of a benevolent, secret order dedicated to moral improvement and the hidden laws of the universe. It was a story that resonated perfectly with the Masonic ideals of brotherhood, enlightenment, and the building of a better world. The Masons did not simply adopt the name. They integrated the entire Rosicrucian quest into their own structure, creating new degrees of initiation that were explicitly Rosicrucian in nature. These higher degrees, often called the Rosicrucian degrees, transformed the Masonic journey. A brother who had mastered the fundamental craft degrees could now advance into a new chamber of mysteries. In these rites, the symbols of the rose and cross took center stage. The candidate might reenact the discovery of Christian Rosenkreuz's vault, experiencing it as a profound allegory for uncovering divine truth within his own soul. The search for the lost word, a central theme in Masonry, became intertwined with the Rosicrucian search for the philosopher's stone. This was no longer just about building a symbolic temple. It was about the alchemical transformation of the self, the very goal outlined in the chemical wedding. This fusion gave Freemasonry a powerful spiritual engine. The lodge was no longer just a society of moral men. It could be seen as a modern embodiment of the invisible brotherhood itself, a visible sanctuary for the same Pensophic ideals that had inspired Comenius. The square and compass now sat alongside the rose and cross, tools for shaping not just stone, but the human spirit. This connection solved a historical problem for the Masons. While their operative traditions claimed great antiquity, their speculative philosophical side needed a pedigree. The Rosicrucian myth provided a bridge, linking the 18th century lodge directly to a purported Renaissance fraternity of adepts, who were themselves heirs to Hermetic and Kabbalistic wisdom. It created an unbroken, if symbolic, chain of transmission for esoteric knowledge. The Rosicrucian Enlightenment had found its most durable vessel. The secret was no longer invisible. It was hidden in plain sight within the rituals of a global fraternity, ensuring that the dream of a spiritual and scientific reformation would be passed down, hand to hand, for generations to come. The story of the scientific revolution is often told as a grand divorce, a bitter separation between faith and reason. But for the Rosicrucian thinkers, this was not a divorce at all, but a sacred marriage. They stood at a crossroads, embracing the new tools of empirical science while viewing them as instruments for decoding a divine creation. The universe was not a cold, mechanical clockwork. It was a living book written by the hand of God, and the new science was simply a more precise way of learning to read its pages. This was their revolutionary synthesis, a path that saw no conflict between the laboratory and the chapel. Consider the English physician Robert Fludd. He was a man deeply immersed in the mystical currents of his time, a defender of the Rosicrucian ideal who wrote vast, intricate volumes on the macrocosm and microcosm. In one breath, he would meticulously describe the circulation of the blood, a radical new scientific discovery. In the next, he would explain it as a reflection of the divine spirit circulating through the cosmos. For Fludd, the human body was a miniature universe, and every anatomical detail was a sacred hieroglyph pointing to a spiritual truth. His science and his mysticism were two languages describing the same miraculous reality. Across the Channel, the German alchemist and physician Michael Mayer embodied this same unity. He was a respected doctor, a man of learning and observation. Yet his most famous work, Atalanta Fugiens, is a masterpiece of alchemical emblems, a fusion of music, poetry, and intricate imagery that maps the soul's journey toward enlightenment. Mayer did not see a contradiction between his medical practice and his alchemical art. Both were methods of healing. One healed the physical body by understanding its humors and organs. The other healed the spirit by understanding its symbolic processes of death and rebirth. The true goal of these men was to read from two sacred texts simultaneously, the Book of Scripture and the Book of Nature. They believed God had authored both, and therefore the truths found in one must perfectly align with the truths found in the other. A new observation through a telescope did not contradict the Bible. It merely offered a deeper, more wondrous interpretation of its verses. When a Rosicrucian-minded scholar peered into a microscope, he was not just looking at cells or insects. He was witnessing the intricate brushstrokes of the divine artist, uncovering layers of a creation that was both physical and profoundly spiritual. This world, you made them pioneers of a science infused with meaning. They were not detached observers, but participatory witnesses in a living, intelligent cosmos. Their empirical curiosity was driven by a sense of reverence, a desire to understand the laws and patterns that governed a world they believed was saturated with divine presence. The quest to turn lead into gold was, for them, the same quest as turning a sinful soul toward God. Both were processes of purification, guided by observable, natural laws that were also expressions of God's will. They challenged the emerging cold rationalism not by rejecting it, but by seeking to warm it with a sacred purpose. So the next time you picture the birth of modern science, do not imagine only the lone genius in a sterile laboratory. Picture also the alchemist in his study, surrounded by flasks and ancient manuscripts, seeing in the swirl of chemicals the same cosmic dance he read about in the stars. For a moment in history, the path to objective discovery and the path to inner enlightenment were one and the same, and this raises a haunting question. What might our world look like if that union had never been broken? The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn emerged in late 19th century London, a product of the Victorian era's intense fascination with the unseen. Its founders claimed their authority from a mysterious cipher manuscript, a document they said connected them to an even more secretive German Rosicrucian order. This was not a casual nod to history. The Golden Dawn built its entire initiatory system upon the bedrock of Rosicrucian mythology, transforming the old symbols into a living, breathing path of magical training. A new member entering the order would progress through grades that were a direct echo of the Rosicrucian journey. The inner order itself was named the Rosi Ruby et Ori Crucis, the ruby rose and golden cross, placing the sacred emblem at the very heart of its mystery. The discovery of Christian Rosenkreuz's vault was not just a story to be read, but a ritual to be experienced. Initiates underwent dramatic ceremonies where they symbolically entered the seven-sided chamber, confronting the allegorical tests and spiritual deaths that would lead to their own rebirth. The Golden Dawn's genius was its synthesis. It took the Rosicrucian ideal of a unified science and expanded it into a complete curriculum of practical magic. Students learn to use tarot cards, celestial invocations, and complex geometric symbols as tools to explore the very principles of cosmic correspondence that the original manifestos had championed. The axiom "as above, so below" became an operational reality in their daily practices. A ritual performed in a London temple was understood to affect the inner planes of consciousness and the outer structure of the cosmos simultaneously. This systematic approach turned the elusive dream of the invisible college into a structured, albeit secret, educational system. The order attracted some of the most brilliant and troubled minds of its time, from the poet W. B. Yeats to the controversial magician Aleister Crowley. For them, the Golden Dawn was the modern incarnation of the fraternity they had been seeking, a visible body for an invisible tradition. Through its rituals and teachings, the order successfully repackaged the Rosicrucian quest for a new age, ensuring that the symbols of the rose and cross would not fade into historical curiosity. It cemented the Rosicrucian legacy as the very spine of modern Western esotericism, proving that a 400-year-old literary mystery could still ignite the search for hidden knowledge in the human soul. Yet the flame of the Rosy Cross did not die out with the secret societies of old. It found a new and powerful voice in the modern world with the rise of the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucians, known universally as Amorc. Emerging in the early 20th century in the United States, this organization presented itself not as a revival, but as the legitimate and public continuation of the ancient fraternity. Its founder, Harvey Spencer Lewis, claimed a direct initiation into the tradition, asserting that the Invisible Brotherhood had simply chosen a new era to step into the light. Amorc genius lay in its method of dissemination. It bypassed the need for secret lodges or physical gatherings by creating a comprehensive system of correspondence courses. For the first time, anyone with a mailing address could receive the teachings of the Rosy Cross directly to their home. These weekly lessons, arriving in plain envelopes, became a gateway for thousands of seekers worldwide. They offered structured lessons on topics from meditation and consciousness to the symbolic interpretation of ancient philosophies, all framed within the Rosicrucian context of personal transformation and cosmic law. This was the universal reformation delivered by post, democratizing a path that had once been the quest of a privileged few. The order presented a tangible lineage, a chain of grandmasters stretching back through the centuries to Christian Rosenkreuz himself, giving historical weight to its claims. Through its popular magazines, public lectures, and the iconic Rosicrucian Park in San Jose, California, Amorc crafted a visible, accessible identity for a tradition built on invisibility. It translated the dense allegories of the chemical wedding into a step-by-step curriculum for the modern aspirant, proving that the old symbols still held power for those seeking meaning in a rapidly changing world. The Invisible College had finally built a campus open to all, and in doing so, it ensured that the Rosicrucian quest would continue, not as a whispered secret, but as a letter waiting in the mailbox. This vision of a transformed world was always the ultimate goal. The Rosicrucian manifestos were not written to create a private club for mystics, but to lay the groundwork for a perfect society, a utopia healed from the inside out by the application of secret wisdom. Their promise of a universal reformation was a detailed blueprint for a new civilization. Think of a world where education was not a privilege for the wealthy, but the birthright of every single person, designed to unlock their innate connection to the cosmos. Imagine a system of medicine that was provided freely to all, a science of healing that treated the whole person, body and spirit, rather than just suppressing symptoms. Envision the end of the bloody religious wars that had torn Europe apart, replaced by a single, unifying truth that transcended petty doctrinal disputes. This was the grand political and social ambition pulsing beneath the alchemical symbols and mysterious vaults. It was a revolution disguised as a revelation. The Invisible Brothers were not just offering spiritual enlightenment, they were proposing a complete restructuring of human society, guided by a benevolent, hidden elite of philosopher kings. This radical idea of a society governed by wisdom rather than by hereditary power or brute force became a hidden seed planted deep in the European imagination. You can see its influence quietly taking root in the idealistic movements that followed. When Sir Thomas More wrote of Utopia, an island society run by reason and shared knowledge, he was tapping into the same yearning for a rational, harmonious world. Centuries later, when Enlightenment thinkers dreamed of a republic led by enlightened citizens, they were echoing the Rosicrucian conviction that a better world was possible if it was guided by those who had mastered the laws of nature and spirit. The manifestos argued that political tyranny and social injustice were simply diseases, symptoms of a humanity that had lost its way and forgotten the sacred patterns of the cosmos. The cure was not a new law or a different king, but a rediscovery of that lost divine science. By realigning society with these eternal principles, poverty, sickness, and conflict would simply fade away, much like a shadow disappears when a light is finally turned on. This was a utopia built not on force, but on understanding, a world where the rose of the heart and the cross of sacred order would blossom in the very fabric of daily life. The rose is a secret told in petals. Each layer unfolds slowly, guarding a mystery at its very center. This is the human heart in its most profound aspect, a symbol of love and spiritual beauty that cannot be rushed into bloom. It thrives not in the open field, but often in protected gardens, hinting that true understanding is an intimate revelation, not a public spectacle. The rose does not shout its meaning. It waits for the seeker to approach, to contemplate, to discover its fragrance and its thorns as part of one complete truth. Its unfolding is the soul's own gradual awakening to divine harmony, a process as natural and as necessary as a flower opening to the sun. In stark contrast stands the cross, an ancient emblem of the material realm. Its horizontal beam represents our earthly existence, the plane of time, space, and physical reality. The vertical beam is the axis of spirit, the direct channel connecting humanity to the divine source above. This intersection is the ultimate meeting point, the crucible where the human and the godly meet. The cross is a structure of sacrifice, yes, but also of profound stability. It is the framework upon which the chaos of life is given order and meaning, the immutable law that gives shape to our fleeting experiences. When these two powerful symbols are united into the rosy cross, they cease to be separate ideas. Their union creates a single, dynamic glyph of human potential. The rose is not merely placed upon the cross, it blossoms from its very center, from the precise point where the two worlds intersect. This is the image of the perfected human, the ultimate goal of the great work. It represents a being whose heart has fully opened through the trials of earthly life, whose love and wisdom are now perfectly aligned with the enduring structure of cosmic law. The base instincts have been transmuted, the fleeting emotions have been refined. What remains is a consciousness that is both fully human and fully divine, a soul that has become a living bridge between heaven and earth. The rose gives the cross its warmth and its purpose. The cross gives the rose its strength and its direction. One without the other is incomplete. A heart without structure is mere sentiment. A structure without a heart is empty dogma. The Rosicrucian quest, in its deepest sense, is the lifelong labor of weaving these two forces together within oneself until they are inextricably fused. The promise of the manifestos was that this state was attainable, that the chemical wedding was not a fantasy, but a real possibility for any soul willing to undergo its own sacred transformation. This secret history did not remain locked in dusty manuscripts. It escaped into the wild currents of art and culture, shaping the dreams of painters and storytellers for centuries. The archetype of the hidden adept, the initiate who holds the keys to a higher reality, became a powerful new figure in the creative imagination. Artists like the Belgian symbolist Jean Delville gave this figure a face. His paintings are filled with ethereal, androgynous beings, figures of luminous intellect who seem to exist in a realm of pure thought. These are not saints or angels from the old religious canon, but Rosicrucian adepts, masters of a spiritual science whose bodies have been refined into vessels of light. They embody the ideal of the philosopher who has transcended the physical, becoming a living bridge between our world and the invisible planes of wisdom. This visual language transformed the quest for enlightenment into something tangible, beautiful, and strangely haunting. It offered a glimpse of what a human being could become, a vision of our own potential evolution. Simultaneously, the Rosicrucian mystery seeped into the very foundations of Gothic literature. The idea of a secret society operating behind the veil of everyday life provided the perfect engine for suspense and wonder. When a protagonist stumbles upon a hidden fraternity with ancient knowledge, they are walking in the footsteps of those who first read the Fama Fraternitatis. The crumbling castle that holds a mystical secret, the wise old man who offers cryptic guidance, the initiation into rites that promise power and peril, these are all direct descendants of the Rosicrucian narrative. This archetype proved so durable and so compelling that it eventually became a staple of modern fantasy and conspiracy fiction. the wise counsel in a hidden realm, the benevolent order working in the shadows to guide humanity, these tropes all trace their lineage back to that invisible college. Even the sprawling narratives of contemporary conspiracy theories, with their claims of hidden elites controlling world events, are a distorted echo of the original Rosicrucian promise. The fantasy of a secret government of enlightened souls was first offered as a hope for a better world, a dream of salvation from above. Culture seized this powerful seed and let it grow into 1,000 different stories, some terrifying, some wondrous, but all asking the same perennial question. What if we are not alone in our quest for meaning? What if a hidden hand is guiding us, not toward control, but toward a light we have not yet learned to see? A generation before the manifestos appeared, another story captured the dark anxieties of the age. The legend of Dr. Faustus told of a scholar so desperate for knowledge and power that he sold his soul to the devil. His quest ended in damnation, a terrifying warning to anyone who dared to reach beyond the limits set by the Church. The Rosicrucian adept walks the very same path as Faust, seeking the same forbidden knowledge of nature's deepest secrets. Yet his story ends not in a demonic pact, but in a sacred vault of enlightenment. This is no coincidence. The manifestos can be read as a direct answer to the Faustian dilemma, a new model for the Renaissance magus that replaced damnation with divine service. Where Faust was driven by pride and a hunger for personal power, the Rosicrucian was guided by humility and a vow to heal humanity. The invisible brotherhood did not command demons. They sought to understand the divine laws woven into creation itself. Their magic was not a rebellion against God, but a deeper form of prayer, a pious science that saw every experiment as an act of reverence. The philosopher's stone was their ultimate goal, but it was never meant for creating worldly wealth. It was a symbol of the purified soul, the only instrument capable of transforming a broken world. Faust wanted to conquer nature for his own glory. The Rosicrucians sought to become a transparent vessel through which nature's own healing powers could flow. This crucial distinction reframed the entire pursuit of hidden knowledge. It was no longer a sin, but a sacred duty, provided the seeker's heart was aligned with a higher purpose. The manifestos offered a way out of the Faustian trap. They presented a path where the thirst for ultimate understanding did not lead to hell, but to a resurrection within a seven-sided chamber of light. From the very moment they appeared, the Rosicrucian texts were met with a storm of doubt. While hopeful seekers wrote letters to the invisible brothers, an equally passionate chorus of critics rose to condemn the entire affair. One of the earliest and most common accusations was that the manifestos were a cunning Protestant plot. To many Catholic writers, the timing was no coincidence. Here was a secret society declaring the Pope's imminent transformation, published in the heart of Protestant Germany just before a continent-wide war. It seemed a clear, if veiled, attempt to undermine the Holy See and rally support for the Lutheran cause using the language of magic and mystery instead of straightforward theology. Other detractors saw something far more sinister. They labeled the Brotherhood a devilish deception, a cabal of sorcerers in league with dark forces. The very idea of an invisible college that could manipulate nature sounded to them like a description of witchcraft. The promise of a universal reformation was not a blessing, but a threat to the established order of both church and state, a prelude to chaos disguised as enlightenment. This skepticism was not confined to the 17th century. Modern academic research has added a new, more clinical layer of criticism. Many contemporary historians view the Rosicrucian phenomenon primarily as a literary event, a powerful thought experiment that never had a physical organization behind it. They point to the complete absence of any verifiable records. How could a group with such grand ambitions, with a central headquarters and a rotating leadership, leave not a single receipt, not one confirmed meeting note, or any reliable eyewitness account of its members? The sheer silence, they argue, is the most compelling evidence of all. These scholars see the manifestos not as the proclamation of a real fraternity, but as a brilliant piece of persuasive writing, a utopian fantasy designed to spark a very real intellectual revolution without the dangers of forming an actual secret society. In this view, the Invisible Brothers were a narrative device, a powerful fiction created to inspire change, yet even this literary theory has its own complexities. If it was a mere fiction, why did the authors embed such precise and profound spiritual instructions within the chemical wedding? Why create such an elaborate initiatory journey if the goal was only political or philosophical debate? The most balanced view accepts that the truth likely lies in a synthesis of these perspectives. The furor was simultaneously a literary creation, a potential political tool, and a spiritual call that resonated with a very real but decentralized network of thinkers. The criticism, both past and present, forces us to confront the heart of the mystery. Does the power of an idea depend on the physical existence of its source, or can a story, so compelling and so perfectly timed, create its own reality in the minds and actions of those who believe in it? The Rosicrucian enigma endures precisely because it lives in this uncertain space, forever balanced between a documented hoax and a spiritual truth that transformed the world. 4 centuries after their first appearance, these cryptic texts still whisper to something deep within us. Why does this particular secret history refuse to fade into the footnotes of time? The answer lies in a perennial human hunger, a deep-seated longing for a world that is more than it seems. We are drawn to the idea that there is a hidden order beneath the chaos, a pattern waiting to be decoded by those with the courage to look. The Rosicrucian manifestos tap directly into this yearning. They promise that enlightenment is not a random accident, but a path, that transformation is possible, and that we are not alone in our seeking. The fantasy of a hidden college of enlightened masters is profoundly comforting. It suggests that humanity is not hurtling blindly through the cosmos, but is being gently, invisibly guided toward a brighter dawn. This is the ultimate antidote to the feeling of being lost and insignificant in a vast, indifferent universe. This same deep-seated need now fuels our modern obsession with conspiracy theories. The underlying psychological mechanism is strikingly similar. Both narratives offer a compelling alternative to a confusing and often frightening reality. Where the Rosicrucian promised a benevolent secret society working for human betterment, many contemporary theories warn of a malevolent cabal orchestrating global control. Yet the appeal is the same. Both provide a simple, if secret, explanation for complex world events. Both assure the believer that they are among the few who can see the truth hidden in plain sight. This transforms a sense of powerlessness into a position of privileged insight. In a world that can feel increasingly disenchanted, stripped of mystery and spiritual depth by the cold light of pure rationalism, these stories re-enchant our existence. They restore a sense of wonder and possibility. The manifestos do not just offer information, they offer initiation. They invite you on a quest, promising that your life could be part of a greater cosmic story. This is why their allure endures. They are not merely historical documents. They are a mirror reflecting our timeless desire to believe that there is more to know, that we can become more than we are, and that a secret wisdom is still waiting just beyond the next page. So whether the Brotherhood was ever real becomes almost irrelevant. Its true power was as a catalyst, a kind of philosophical enzyme that accelerated the fusion of hidden knowledge with public thought. This secret history irrevocably shaped the trajectory of the West, channeling ancient esoteric rivers into the broad mainstream of our culture. Consider the scientific revolution itself. While we often credit cold rationalism, the early pioneers were men steeped in the Rosicrucian ideal of a unified cosmos. Their drive to uncover nature's laws was fueled by a belief that they were reading the divine mind, a motivation that goes far beyond mere data collection. This spiritual impulse gave their work a profound sense of purpose, embedding a quest for ultimate meaning into the very heart of empirical inquiry. This influence then crystallized within the fraternal organizations that spread across Europe and America. Freemasonry provided a social and ritual container for the Rosicrucian mythos, turning the solitary seeker's journey into a collective experience. The lodge became a visible sanctuary where the symbols of the rose and cross were not just studied, but lived. This created a network of individuals bound by a common language of moral and spiritual development, ensuring these ideals were passed down through generations outside the confines of traditional religion. Centuries later, the echoes of this symbolic language reached the nascent field of psychology. Carl Jung, in his deep dive into alchemy, did not see it as failed chemistry. He recognized it as a profound projection of the human psyche, a map of the individuation process. The alchemical stages of nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, the death and rebirth of the king, the search for the hidden stone, all of these were, for Jung, archetypal representations of the soul's journey toward wholeness. His work effectively translated the Rosicrucian quest into the modern language of the unconscious, arguing that the transformation they sought outwardly in the laboratory was always an inward, psychological process. The chemical wedding was a drama playing out in the human mind. Ultimately, the most enduring legacy is the very template it provided for the modern spiritual seeker. Before the manifestos, the path to enlightenment was largely defined by strict monastic orders or church doctrine. The Rosicrucian narrative introduced a new archetype, the independent individual on a personal quest for hidden wisdom. This figure, armed with intellect and intuition, seeking initiation not through an institution but through direct encounter with symbolic truth, became a powerful model. It is a template we still follow today, whether we are exploring meditation, studying philosophy, or simply striving to become better versions of ourselves. We are all, in a sense, heirs to that initial call. The promise of a universal reformation may not have transformed society in one grand sweep, but it quietly reshaped our inner landscape, leaving us with a restless and persistent question. What is the next stage of your own great work? From 3 anonymous texts to a 400-year legacy, the Rosicrucian Enlightenment has proven to be far more than a literary hoax. It was a seed that grew in the hidden soil of Western consciousness, flowering into the scientific revolution, the rituals of fraternal orders, and the very framework of modern spiritual seeking. This journey reveals a persistent human fascination with the idea of a hidden wisdom, a knowledge that promises not just power, but profound reformation. The call for a universal transformation always began with the self, with the inner alchemy of turning the lead of our base nature into the gold of an awakened spirit. The symbols of the rose and cross mapped this interior journey, a path of sacrifice and blossoming that each must walk alone, yet never entirely without guidance. This secret history challenges us to look beyond the surface of our world and our own selves, to ask what unifies our fragmented understanding. The manifestos offered a key, suggesting that the divine is not separate from creation, but woven into its every law and pattern, waiting to be read by anyone with the courage to learn the language. So we are left with one final, reflective question, a mystery that has echoed through the centuries. Could the true Rosicrucian fraternity be an inner state of enlightenment, waiting to be discovered within each of us? Let us know what you think in the comments, and subscribe for more journeys into the world's most captivating secret histories.